Greetings, Earthlings. Today I want to discuss algebra and common sense, or more generally, math and common sense. And the kind of thought-provoking questions are, am I human and what might I be? So those are out of context, so let's see the actual question that I have in mind. 7 more than 2/5 of my height is 2 less than 1/3 of 2/3 of 20 more than my height in feet. How tall am I in inches? Am I human? And what might I be? So let's first solve this and get part A, and then I'll talk about B and C. So the main purpose, there are kind of two parts to this video. One is practicing our word problems and translating that into algebra, but the second part is this common sense business. So all right, let's set it up. How do we set it up? So there are many ways to do this. You can kind of go from left to right, as I discussed in the previous video, or you could focus on the is, right? So that is your equals. So everything that comes before that is going to be on the left side. So why don't we start there? So 7 more than, so instead of saying 7 plus, I'm gonna put it as plus 7, 2/5 of my height. So the first thing I'm actually gonna write is 2/5 of h, and then the plus 7, and then the is your equal sign. So that's our left side. Our right side is 1/3 of. The word of means multiply in word problems. So if that's confusing to you, think of it as if I take half of 100, I'm doing 1/2 times 100, and that's how you get 50. So the word of means multiply. So 1/3, I put down my 1/3. As soon as I see an of, I'll open a parentheses. The reason I don't just put a multiplication, this, by the way, the parentheses assumes that you're multiplying. I don't just put a multiplication sign because after the of, you might have a whole huge expression, and I want to make sure that whole expression is in parentheses. That's why I put the parentheses. So 1/3 of, 1/3 open parentheses, 2/3 of, so I could either open another parentheses and then have to close a lot of them at the end, or I can close this off and then open up a new parentheses. So 2/3 of, again, 2/3 multiplied, but I open parentheses because a phrase is coming up. So what's the phrase? 20 more than my height. So instead of saying 20 plus h, it's a better habit to say h plus 20 because of this. So for example, when we have 2 less than, it's not 2 minus, but it's a minus 2 at the end. So for the same reason, even with the addition, it doesn't matter, but I don't want to mess up on the subtraction. So with the addition, I have the good habit of always putting it plus 20 when it's 20 more than, instead of just saying 20 plus h. All right, so to recap, we have 1/3 of 2/3 of 20 more than h, that's this part, and we wanted 2 less than that, so that's why there's a minus 2 at the end. So here's our equation. I'm gonna solve this fairly rapidly. So how do we do this? So first of all, let's bring this 2 over here. Now, let me also tell you guys how I'm thinking about this. Like, why did I bring the 2 over here first? So the thing I notice is I have the over 5 and these 2 over 3s, and that's ugly. I don't like fractions. So my first big move is going to be to get rid of all of the fractions. Now that's not the only way you can do it. You could keep the fractions and work with them and find common denominators and then get rid of them at the end, but I find that to be very annoying. So a habit that I really like and I encourage other people to use and to have is to get rid of the fractions as soon as possible. Now, I don't want to get rid of them immediately because I have these innocent bystanders, these little numbers over here, and if I try to multiply the entire equation by something, I'm going to end up having to work with 2 numbers instead of just 1, so that's why I brought this -2, this -2 over here, and now I have a +9. So that was for a strategic reason. And now, once we try to get rid of the fractions, we're going to multiply by the LCM of 5 and 9. Keep in mind, you could multiply the left by 9 and the right side by 5, but then that's 2 steps. So I want to do this all in 1 step, so that's why I'm going to pick the LCM, which is 45, and multiply everything by 45. Now, what I'm going to show you guys here is going to have a mistake. So first, let's do this first, and then I'll show you the mistake. So I'm going to multiply the entire left side here by 45, and 45 over 5 is going to be 9. So that's where I got this 18, because 9 times 2h is going to be 18h. Now the 45 is going to impact not just the first term, but the second term as well. So the mistake I have here, and this is why I circled the 81, is that when I simplified 45 and 5, I got 9, and I assumed that 9 was going to multiply that 9 to get an 81. When in fact, the 45 is multiplying both of these. So this should really be the 405 that I have below here. So we're going to get into the correct solution later, but I just want to make a point with both of these. So it'll illustrate some cool stuff anyway, so just follow along with the mistake. So let's just assume for the time being that we made this mistake and this is 81. So 2/9 we're going to multiply in, so we get, and also, sorry, 45 over 9 is 5, and 5 times 2 is 10. So that's where I got the 10, and now I'm multiplying the 10 in by each of those. So that's 10h, and 10 times 20 is 200. So, in other words, the 45 multiplied every single term here. But on the left, I had to multiply both because this is an addition, whereas on the right, this is a multiplication, so I only have to deal with one fraction. So now that we have this incorrect equation, let's solve this. I'm going to move the 10h over to get 8h. I'm going to move the 81 over to get 119. Now divide both by 8, so h is 119 over 8 feet, which is approximately 15 feet because this is almost 120 over 8. So we'll leave that for a second. Now let's convert this to inches. How do you convert this to inches? Well, it's 119 over 8 feet times 12 inches per foot. Now here's an important point which I'll emphasize again much later in the series, which is you could just multiply this by 12, but I want to teach you guys and show that keeping track of the units, especially when the problems get harder, will be really important. So not only do I simplify the 12 and the 8 to get 2 and 3 by dividing both by 4, but I also simplify the units. So you're allowed to simplify units just like the numbers. That's why I crossed off feet divided by feet means there are no units left. So our answer, the only units that are left are inches. That's why the answer is in inches. So now we just do 119 times 3, that's 357 over 2. So that's how I got this number, which is 178.5 inches. So that's the answer to part A, the incorrect answer, I should say. But now let's go back to parts B and C. So am I human and what might I be? Well, if you're 15 feet tall, you could be, well, clearly that's unusual for a human. So theoretically perhaps, but in practice probably not. So I'm going to say part B is no. Part C might be a snake, it could be a giraffe, it might be other things like a whale or, so the point I'm trying to make is that this is not a math question, now it's a common sense question. So the algebra won't ever tell you whether the numbers make sense, they'll just spit out a number. So you can check it, but we have to bring it back to the real world and to see what is the interpretation of these numbers. All right. Now let's go back and actually do the problem correctly. So instead of this being an 81, it should have been a 405 because 45 times 9 is going to be 360 plus 45, which is 405. So I'm going to solve this again, move the 10h over, so that's 8h, move the 405 over there, that we get negative 205. So here's my simplified answer in feet, which is approximately negative 26. And in inches, again, notice I'm multiplying by 12 inches per 1 foot, and I'm canceling out the units of feet to get an answer in inches. So we're going to get negative 307.5 inches. So that would be the answer to part A. And now let's think about parts B and C. So we got a height that's negative. So unless this is some weird quantum physics, negative dimensional, mystery physics thing that I'm not aware of, in normal life, if you get an answer that's negative to a physical measurement, that's very suspicious. So one thing might be to check is we might want to check over our work. In this case, what happened is I designed the problem poorly. So that's what happens when you basically just pick numbers at random and create an algebra problem. The answer may not make sense. And so that's what I wanted to get across, which is, once you get the math, you still have to keep your common sense going in parallel. Like, do these numbers make sense? Am I doing something wrong, or maybe there's a mistake in the problem? Math is just a tool. Algebra is just a tool. It's not going to solve all the world's problems just on its own. So, but that said, it's kind of the larger point I want to get here is not how you solve this problem, but in getting these various numbers in inches, feet, which that was the skill portion, but the common sense portion is interpreting it. Like, what do these numbers mean? Like, what might be 15 feet? And I find that to be pretty interesting. In fact, I would say this connection of math to common sense or math to real life and to other issues, that's really where it's at, I think. Well, there's math for its own sake, which can be really fun, but also we want to, we want math to be a useful tool in our lives. So whether you like math just because you love math or because you want to use it in your own life, I recommend always running your math or your algebra in parallel with your common sense. So don't just, get numbers and assume that you did it correctly or that solves the problem. So in fact, no math textbook will answer parts B and C for you. All right. I will see you guys in the next video.